With the end of September, beginning of fall, comes the rise of the size of my allergies all. The sneezes, the coughing, the wheezes, the tears, they've bothered me every chilled season for years. Bother's no bother with meds and great care, and the burden of allergies is one I can bear. But there's one sensitivity more than the rest that puts my instinct to live to the test. Rolling in leaves is for children, of course, I don't mind foregoing partaking, but hot apple cider, pressed straight from the source, take it away. I can't. My heart is breaking. Hay rides can be fun, with or without the sun, though they're sillier as one gets older. But all of those apples, and I can't have one? Pardon me while I cry on your shoulder. I don't care for dogs. I can live without nuts. I'm content with a strawberry's flavor. But the scent stings my nostrils as the knife gently cuts off a spherical cap I can't savor. And that beautiful mush apple sauce used to gush straight from large plastic jars to my mouth. Now, just a spoonful, and I have to rush to my EpiPen, or things start to go south. I can never bite into a crunchy Smitten, or a green Granny Smith, bright and sour. I cannot begin to enjoy a small bin of Honeycrisps ripe to devour. And yes, I can eat apple pies without dying. The baking does something that renders them tame, but the sweet mushy pie is not near as satisfying as bobbing for apples. Miraculous game. So as you go a-picking at your nearest orchard, keep in mind what a privilege is yours, that your throat doesn't close, making breathing quite hard when you bask in the fruits of your chores. Obviously, I wrote that at the beginning of the month, at the end of September, and the beginning of fall. Um, and I figured I'd talk about what I've written about over the course of the past month on these videos, but I figured it's short, it's fun, why not just read it? I have a couple of other videos that involve reading poetry to the camera or while the camera focuses on something else, and other little bits of literature, and I encourage you to look at those. Last week around this time I was reciting The Raven to this camera. I did it I don't know how many times, but the one time that it turned out well, that's the, I think, video right previous to this one. And then the two videos before that are me reading passages from The Legend of Sleepy Hollow while the camera was trained on places in Sleepy Hollow. I read about the old Dutch church while the camera looked at the old Dutch church, and this very interesting sculpture of the Headless Horseman. Someone else was holding the camera so that I could be holding the book and reading, because I didn't memorize those like I memorized The Raven. Um, but the camera was looking at that sculpture, and I read the introduction of the idea of the Headless Horseman in that story. So those are fun little videos, and I like the idea of speaking short literary things over images taken with the camera, and I want to do more of it. So I hope that you'll watch those videos, which are much shorter than these videos tend to be. I'm considering doing more of these kinds of videos so that I can talk about less in each of them, because the last one I did was almost an hour. Hopefully this one won't be. And I've written down the things in the order that I want to talk about them, but also to make sure that I get to them in a timely manner. Last time there were a couple of things that I didn't get to that I had hoped to get to, that I even said in the beginning, I'm going to get to this, and then I didn't get to it. So that's why I've written it all down. And it says, start with the Apple poem, and then talk about literature videos, and my trip to Sleepy Hollow earlier this month, which is how I got video of the old Dutch church and the Headless Horseman sculpture. It is only a half hour north of New York City, which I realize doesn't put it within striking distance of the vast majority of people, but New Yorkers or people who live in the Hudson Valley, if you're into the ghost stories and if you're into the Halloween season, visit Sleepy Hollow any time of the year, but in October I think is when things really get Headless Horseman-y. They've got some attractions that my roommate and I did not pay for, but we kind of skirted around the edge, and we could see bright lights, and a friend of mine's operating a demon horse puppet, um, that I found out after we went. It wouldn't have been quite enough to get us to pay $40 or whatever it was to go to the thing. Maybe we will one day, but if you are into ghost stories and the legend of Sleepy Hollow, then just being there is the cool thing. And walking the path, they've got the old Dutch church that was part of Washington Irving's inspiration, behind which he is buried under a tree where apparently he sat while he wrote some of the story. Um, there's the sculpture, and there are, I guess, maybe especially around Halloween, there are all kinds of um, headless horseman decorations around, and we found a lot of them. And in my blog post about Atlas Obscura-ing Sleepy Hollow, I got pictures of every representation that I found of the headless horseman. Um, and so going to places like that, I think every place has its mythology, as I'm finding out. I go into the local bookstores in Michigan, and ghost stories of the Great Lakes, ghost stories of Michigan. So every place has its legends, but the legend of Sleepy Hollow is particularly famous, and it was convenient for me to go. And it was what I wrote it up as an Atlas Obscura event for me, but there were really only a few Atlas Obscura places around that area, and strictly speaking, I didn't go to the Rockefeller estate. I just skirted around it, and I could see bits of it from the road. I think I walked through part of it, because we went up to a church that has Chagall and Matisse designed stained glass, and we didn't go in because, again, it costs money, and I don't give money to churches. But maybe one day I'll attend a service there, and hopefully that means I get to see them for free. I did see one in its glory; it was very nice. I got a picture of that in the blog post. But we took the road that the maps said we should take to get there. On the way back, we found a trailhead, and kind of looked it up and saw that the trailhead would take us right back to the churchyard behind the old Dutch church. And it was a much prettier, less traffic, because there's a trail, not a road, so no cars or anything. And and that's the kind of thing that I go for in the Atlas Obscura events that I like, travels that I do. I don't so much. I mean, it's nice to have the Atlas Obscura places as landmarks, and I want to see them, and I want to check them off the list. And if they're interesting, then I want to experience what is interesting about them. But that trail, we had no idea we were going to take that trail. I think it was the highlight of the trip. Um, so read about that. Visit Sleepy Hollow. There are all kinds of adaptations of the legend of Sleepy Hollow, but the story itself, in fact, I should have grabbed the book, because I have a tiny little book that has the legend of Sleepy Hollow and Rip Van Winkle. It's very short. You can just read it. Then there's the Wishbone version. Are You Afraid of the Dark did it. There's the Tim Burton movie. There's the Disney movie. Yeah, so look into Sleepy Hollow. And moving along, so I told you about the other videos that I made that I want you to watch, and you should watch all the videos that I made. I mean, I don't put it on YouTube unless I deem it at least a little bit worthy. Not all of them are great. But I also discovered that if you like a video, and this is where I might say you should like this video, if you click the little thumbs up, it doesn't just add tick marks to the amount of likes that the video has. It shows up on your channel under liked videos. I guess if you have a channel, and it does that, and who doesn't these days? So I discovered that, and so I want to refer you to that as a place to see the videos that I particularly like. I don't like every video just because I like it. I love all the honest trailers. I'm not going to like each one of them because I want to kind of what's the word? Curate my liked videos section, so it's only select ones. And last week, one of the things I didn't get to was talking about the liked videos, and one of them was the 8-minute Jurassic World little movie, Battle at Big Rock. So check that out if you're into dinosaur movies, or just if you have 8 minutes. That's the great thing about YouTube videos. On the one hand, it's a little bit sad that people are putting less effort into making smaller things, and that's I don't know what that says for the future of longer things, but that little movie was fun, and I'll mostly be using it for promoting on my own channel the things done by friends and family. For instance, my brother's band Maybird. Um, I have 2 music videos of theirs liked, and you may be able to spot a younger version of me, in fact, several younger versions of me in the video for Looking Back. I had to sign a waiver for that one, and then they recently put up one. I forget what it's called, but it's there. It's in black and white. Um, and also my friends Ilya and Katha, they do little classical music, mostly off the beaten track classical music videos, and there's usually something. Sometimes it's them performing, Ilya on piano, Katha on violin, but also they sometimes do little animation type things, and so they will be there, and also the Screen Junkies who do the Honest Trailers that I mentioned, and I've liked some other things of theirs, but I have the trailer there for their feature-length documentary about the movie Galaxy Quest, which has been one of my favorite movies for the past, I guess, 20 years, because 20 years ago is when it came out, and that's why they made a documentary about it, and how it kind of how it both showed what fandom culture was back around in the late 90s when it hadn't become the only thing on the internet, or at least the dominant force on the internet. And it predicted it becoming the dominant force on the internet and fan interactions, and it kind of gave you a sense of what it was like to be a Trekkie, even if you didn't really know what Star Trek was, which I didn't at the time. But I knew enough to know. So you watch the movie Galaxy Quest, find it somewhere and watch it. It's a wonderful movie with an amazing cast. And then this Galaxy Quest documentary called Never Surrender is, I'm hoping to get some tickets to see it here in New York. It's going to be screened in movie theaters for one night, the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, which I think is November 26th. I'm going to try to go see it. And then it will probably stream somewhere. It's not going to just disappear after the one time. But so the trailer will give you more instructions on how to actually see it. And briefly, I'm wearing my Gillibrand 2020 t-shirt, which I received in the mail a month after she dropped out of the race. But I contributed any amount in exchange for it before she had dropped out of the race. So it wouldn't have made sense to get it after she dropped out of the race. But it makes perfect sense to receive it after she dropped out of the race because she did. And I wasn't sure that I was going to get it because I thought, oh, she dropped out of the race. I'm not going to get the buttons. I'm not going to get the t-shirt. But I got the buttons, and now I have the t-shirt, and maybe one day it will once again be relevant. It will be nice. I think Kirsten Gillibrand would make a great president one day. A video that I did not like into the like sections. I enjoyed it. I liked it, but I didn't like it because something like this video that I'm about to mention doesn't need to be promoted by me because it's on the Disney YouTube channel and the Star Wars YouTube channel. It's the Rise of Skywalker final trailer. It did not make me as excited as the Last Jedi did, or Last Jedi trailer did, and it did not make me as nostalgic as the Force Awakens trailers did. But I am looking forward to the completion of the Skywalker saga, the Episode 9, the 9-episode arc, and I cheated with this because I can't use an Amazon gift card at a used library sale. But now I have it. I have checked it in the DVD player, made sure it works. So my roommate and I are going to watch episodes 1 through 8 straight through, probably skipping the end credits a week or a few days before we see The Rise of Skywalker in a movie theater. And it's going to be the first time. I've been considering doing this sort of thing for a long time, particularly with Star Wars and Harry Potter. But my first time binging a movie series with DVDs. I guess I did it with Twilight one day after I gave some blood, and then I came back. I was soaking from the rain, and I had just found the Twilight movies on a streaming service, and I streamed them all because I'd been curious because I read the books. But but that doesn't count because it's not DVDs. It's kind of like I can listen to a book, but I don't count it as having been read unless I actually read it. So I got this from Amazon, and I'm looking forward to watching all of them back to back to back in the lead up to The Rise of Skywalker, and also then seeing The Rise of Skywalker. Was there something else? Oh well, it's just I've been wanting to see 7, 8, and 9 since I saw the original trilogy and knew that it was 4, 5, 6, and then they did the prequels 1, 2, 3, and I had hoped that I would see George Lucas's vision for 7, 8, 9. That didn't work out, but I'm perfectly happy with what they've been doing so far. I'm sure I'll enjoy The Rise of Skywalker, and then I will be done with Star Wars movies. Not with watching them should they become available, but with buying them. This is the second to last Star Wars purchase that I would make. Star Wars, and then okay, so other DVD things. It occurred to me that it would have been better to talk about. I talked about which Halloween books I was going to read, and I will get to talking about a few of those later. But it occurred to me that I should have also talked about the Halloween DVDs that I plan to watch. Not the movie Halloween. I don't own any of the Halloween movies, but movies that you watch around Halloween because they're creepy or scary or whatever. And so I got a bunch of them over there. I'm going to talk about 4 of them at least. I'm getting rid of, having given them their ceremonial final watches. But I do want to mention this one. It is obviously called Freaks by the director of the Bela Lugosi Dracula, which I don't own. Yeah, I'm hoping one day to get the box set of all 33 of the original classic Universal monsters. This starred the likes of Johnny Eck and the Hilton sisters, who were very famous conjoined twins, and this whole bunch of Prince Rainier, who was the human torso, real circus freaks, like the original, like the from the golden age of sideshow freak shows. What if you go to Coney Island now? You can see the latest generation of, and it's a wonderful movie. And I found out this time around that whereas this DVD, the movie in here, is 64 minutes long, the movie was originally an hour and a half, and they cut out a lot of very, very disturbing stuff, and now I know what some of that disturbing stuff is, but I guess the hour and a half cut is lost. So, but this is definitely worth checking out. It's ridiculous, it's really scary at times, and just seeing Prince Rainier roll and light his own cigarette, seeing Johnny Eck walking around on his hands. It's very unique movie, and from what I've heard, not exploitative. So this is worth a viewing, especially around Halloween. But great thing about Halloween movies, they're not like Christmas movies where it's weird to watch them not around Christmas. Scary movies, you can watch them any time of the year. I've gotten kind of like the displaying lenticular covers on the video. I like watching them as I film. So this is obviously Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. It is a movie like most Harry Potter movies that I associate with November. And this is the only lenticular cover of the Harry Potter movies. You see it goes from Harry and Dumbledore to Draco and Snape. And it kind of made me think, as did walking by the Star Wars movies in Best Buy the other day, that I like, and I'm hoping that, it's what I'm going to get out of having done the Star Wars movies the way I did. But I got the Harry Potter DVDs as they came out, and I'm possibly one day going to get a Blu-ray player, and then I'll get the whole Harry Potter series on Blu-ray. It'll probably be 8 of the few Blu-rays that I actually get, but I don't have Sorcerer's Stone in widescreen. But I got them as they came out, and so they the marketing people, I guess, were still finding their rhythm with the packaging for the Harry Potter movies. And so the first two came out with the nice painted character faces all arranged, I guess the original Star Wars movies were presented. Um, and then they started putting the actors on the covers in still shots, like action shots, staged action shots. And then the fifth cover has kind of shiny foil stuff, and I think the seventh or eighth covers do as well in their slipcases. And this has a lenticular cover. Kind of makes sense because we're watching two sets of teacher-student things. Um, but and that's just, it's interesting to have that diversity of covers within a single franchise, and that's how I have the Star Wars movies. But I went by, and if you get Harry Potter movies new these days, then they all look pretty much the same. There's a single design theme running through them, and now the Star Wars movies have had that done too. You go to get a Star Wars movie from Best Buy or Target or something, then they all look pretty much the same. So I'm glad that I have, and also DVD covers are bigger than Blu-ray covers, just like VHS covers were bigger than DVD covers, and it's made smaller for convenience, but it's better for display the bigger it is. Um, I'm hearing voices outside my door. They might start. They've been doing some work out there, so it might get noisy. But I think I'm close enough, and my voice is clear enough that that shouldn't be a real problem. They might start playing music, in which case um, I won't. I won't indicate that I can hear it. Um, but just to warn you, that might happen. A couple more DVD things. This one can wait a little bit because it ties in with a book. My collection of Disney movies continues. This one I also kind of cheated because I actually got it from West Sider Books because it was there, and it's one of the um, 90s golden age Disney movies that I want to have all of them. And it was only $3, which is cheaper than DVDs often are at West Sider. Um, this I got at the library for just $1. I haven't watched either of them because I had to watch the Halloweeny movies. But they are the latest in my Disney collection. I'm pretty confident that they will work. Um, I've seen a lot of Robin Hood adaptations that were not very good, but I think this is unofficially considered to be the best. That's all I'll say about those two. And I got a couple of other movies for my roommate. They are on her shelf, and they are Aliens, the sequel to Alien, um, and probably the best of that franchise with Sigourney Weaver, and The Fifth Element, another science fiction that I won't even try to explain, and then a movie that I won't name because it's a gift for somebody else, but it was plastic wrapped, factory wrapped, so that's nice. And then the only book that I got at a library sale is this one, which I've had on my to read list for a while, and it's a nice little paperback, The Secret History of Wonder Woman. Um, there's a there's a movie, I forget what it's called, but it's about same thing, how Wonder Woman came about. Um, but this will have, I think, probably more details. It might be a little bit more reliable, and I'm curious about it. Look up the history of Wonder Woman, because not the book, the history of Wonder Woman, but just learn a little bit about how Wonder Woman was invented. Um, it'll be worth your time. It's very interesting. Now, what does Halloween DVDs, Freaks, Star Wars? Um, there is a link below from my blog called "What Do You Think?" and I'm not going to talk about it here now, but I encourage you to read it and respond if you think I'm wrong, or if you think I'm right. It's about not wanting to talk about what it's about, and so I'm not going to talk about it. Um, uh, but in a similar vein to it, I want to preview something that I'm going to write, which I had somebody was talking about how um, uh, she's trying to apply for citizenship or something in another country, and because of the way we do the Mr., Mrs., Ms. honorifics, that was a little confusing in that other country. and so she was talking on Facebook about does anybody have anything to say about this sort of thing, and I just it occurred to me to say, why do we use them at all? Especially if we're getting to a point where we are deconstructing gender and trying not to let it matter, like trying not to let someone make a decision based on whether or not they know from the fact, the statistics and identifying marks, whether someone is male or female or in between or on the outside. Um, why would we still use Mr. and Mrs. Ms. if we must have, like I said, J.K. Rowling, K.A. Applegate in the 90s used their initials instead of their first names as their author names on their books, um, famously to avoid male readers looking at it and saying, "Oh, a woman wrote that. I'm not going to be interested in reading it," which wouldn't probably have worked on me, but I guess it was a danger back then. But why don't I go by, instead of me going by Mr. Netsky? Why don't I go by A.E. Netsky, my initials? So, and write something about that maybe later today. Um, but that was just a thing that I had thought about, and it is because then we have Mrs. Ms. Miss, which not only reveals that it is a woman, but whether or not she's married, as if that. I mean, Ms. came around because women didn't want to use Miss or Mrs., which are established as Mrs. is married and Miss is unmarried or a little girl. Ms. is, it doesn't matter. At least that is my understanding of it. When I write query letters or anything to women that I don't know, I use Ms. MS. So there's that. Okay, so going over the books that I read, the creepy books, don't really want to say too much about these two. They were fun. They are fun, small books. You should make room for fun, small books amidst all the big, important books that you pride yourself on reading. I'm covering up the guy's face. This, apparently, one of the novel offshoots of a series that my dad loved when he was growing up. And this, one of the series of books that came before the Goosebumps books, which was a series of books, scary books, that I loved when I was growing up. But and you know the reviews, my not reviews, responses, my responses to them on my blog are linked to below. Violent on the set, and I forget what the title for that one was, but it's down there. This one I only want to say a little bit about because it only said a little bit about the reason why I bought it, which is The Blood Countess of Transylvania, Elizabeth Barthoy, who probably wasn't as big of an influence on the character of Dracula as the author here surmises, which is probably why it was only about a third of the book dealing with her, and then the rest of it was interesting, but not why I was reading the book. But it did get me looking for other Elizabeth Barthory. It doesn't have her name. Convenient. Bathory. Elizabeth Bathory. Countess Elizabeth Bathory. But she's worth her own vampire story, and I guess she has some. There are some Countess Dracula movies and novels. I'd like to read an actual, like a biography this thick, all about her, maybe a little thicker. I'm sure something like that exists. So it set me looking for some things that I will find very interesting. I didn't find it. It was interesting, and I'm glad I read it, but my title for that response to that one is Reader Beware, You're In for a Snare. And I also don't want to talk too much about this one. The title of the blog post below is Unbend the Tale of Sweeney Todd. and it's about how I just don't know why this book exists in the form that it does. And that's all I will say about this book. Love the movie and the musical. So the three specifically Halloween books that that I actually want to talk about are these next three, which I'll hold up one at a time. Lives of the Monster Dogs. This is one of the few books that I've ever purchased purely based on its cover, and I'm sure you can understand my impulse. It's a really interesting take on Frankenstein type monsters. Um, the author, I don't believe, has another published book, but she teaches a creative writing intensive or something right up at the Tarrytown Metro North stop, which is the stop that we used to get to Sleepy Hollow. And that very much intrigues me. I have never wanted to do a creative writing intensive, really, until I knew that she teaches one, also named Kirsten, by the way. She teaches one practically in Sleepy Hollow. So it's a lot of money. I probably won't do it anytime soon, but I really want to do it. And so this has not, supposedly the movie rights were purchased. There are stage adaptations. There's an opera libretto as part of the narrative in here. Um, it's really interesting. It's about a scientist who creates, or I guess by the time his creation is successful, he's past life. Um, but he decides that soldiers who are humanoid dogs, dogs that are altered, who have the brain capacity of humans and also the extremities of humans, would make the most loyal soldiers. And it turns out he's wrong, as people with such ideas often are. Um, I wrote my version of Frankenstein as well, and I'm currently trying to get it published. And it's, you know, it's never okay to do anything of the sort that Frankenstein does in the original book, Frankenstein. Um, the dogs moved to New York City, and the first time I read this, I didn't live in New York City, and it was kind of a fantasy place still in my mind. And this time I had a real idea of, well, you can't really build a castle there because of all the stuff that's. I reacted the way that I often react when I'm watching movies that take place in New York City, and somebody gets on the subway on the Upper East Side. It's the Red Line, and they end up on in the West Village or in the East Village. Um, but this is more accurate than that. It's just a little bit more fantastical, obviously. Um, really interesting book, and it's kind of like it was part of a theme that I found among my books this time around. If you've read Frankenstein and you don't want to read it every year, but you want to read something like it every year, this is your next step. Like this is one of the other monster novels, not nearly as famous, but also not nearly as overdone. And this also is one of those. If you've, I mean, it even says the most clever and riveting vampire novel since Dracula, which is one of the reasons, the reason that I bought it. I think also at the time that I bought it, I knew that Will Smith was going to be in a movie based on it, and that might have played a part. Still don't really know who Dean Koontz is beyond the fact that he's an author, but I know who Richard Matheson is, and don't really want to talk much about him. Although he did write a lot of creepy movies that you've seen, or weird, quirky movies that you've seen, uh, based on him, based on things he wrote. The Adam Sandler movie Click, based on a short story by Richard Matheson, um, and other things like that. One of the most famous episodes of The Twilight Zone, A Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, um, based on a Richard Matheson story, and revived both in the movie version of The Twilight Zone with John Lithgow in the Captain Kirk, William Shatner role, and then recently redone with Adam Scott, I think, in that role, as part of Jordan Peele's revival of The Twilight Zone as a series. Um, this book itself was part of the inspiration for Night of the Living Dead, even though it's not about zombies. Even though from the Will Smith version you might suspect it was about zombies, it is about vampires. Everybody turns into vampires who are like zombies in that they are reanimated corpses, but not like zombies in that they can communicate with you. And I rewatched the Will Smith DVD. I have it. It's not one of my Will Smith movies that I must own, but I do own it, and so I'm keeping it. Um, I'll talk about the book first. One of the most haunting things in the book is uh, the guy's Robert Neville's former neighbor, current vampire, taunts him, and it's just really like you kind of hear it echoing around in your head as you read it, the way that he hears it every night. Robert Neville does, with the guy just shouting, "Come out, Neville!" And so that was a big part of the creepiness factor of the book. And there are a lot of other things. At the time, I was kind of researching the development of the movie, and I knew that Arnold Schwarzenegger was potentially going to be in an earlier movie adaptation that didn't end up happening. Um, it would have been perfect for him. Not that the Will Smith movie doesn't work in its own way, but the Robert Neville is mostly silent in the book, and that's really what you want from Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mean, not that I enjoy him when he talks, but in Terminator, the original Terminator, he's mostly silent, except for the few things that he said that became famous lines. Um, and so you would have been perfect for the book as directly translated into movie form. And there are a couple other not Night of the Living Dead movie adaptations of this. Um, I forget what they're called because they're not called I Am Legend. Um, but there's some of that I haven't seen them. I'd like to see them. The Will Smith version, um, with Will Smith, you do want him to talk, and you want him to talk a lot. And so they made some changes, not having to do with the monsters themselves, but they made some changes that gave him more opportunities to talk, and it's great. They're very clever, creative, um, and they made other changes to make it more current, but they changed it to the point where it's not really an adaptation of the book, it's a riff on the book, which is fine, but I wanted an adaptation of the book, so I initially really didn't like it. Now I see its value, I like it, I'm keeping it, I'll watch it every October, but, read the book, see the movie, maybe not in that order, neither will spoil the other, because they're very different. And if you've had too much Dracula, but you want some good classic vampire, I Am Legend. Not a vampire is Batboy. First musical I ever saw in New York. Carrie Butler, Richard Pruitt, Devin May, cast members came out. Devin May was Batboy. Carrie Butler currently in the Beetlejuice musical. Appropriately enough, Beetlejuice, one of the movies that I have over there. The Beetlejuice musical, not nearly as good as Batboy. Fun, not Batboy. This came out, I think it was published a couple of years after the musical premiered on Broadway in 2001. And I got it then, read it then. I've listened to the cast recording at least once a year since before I saw Batboy. And in those earlier years, I probably listened to it upwards of 20 or 30 times in a single year. But I rarely read the script, and so this was my big climax of October reading this year, and it was great. The script holds up as well as the score. I think that they are some of the finest of recent musical theater, and recent, I mean the last 20 years, since I started paying attention. That's what I mean by recent. And you get more nuance on the characters in the book. For instance, the parents, who seem diametrically opposed if you're just listening to the score. And scores are, by their nature, the characters at their most extreme because it's only the parts where they decided to sing. But you see how the parents of Shelley tried to come together and raise her well, give her a good home and a good upbringing. Scenes of the other characters, the Taylor family, get a lot more in the book than in the score alone. and there are bits of score that are not on the cast recording because they weren't long enough or significant enough to warrant their own tracks. Um, but it was nice to see those bits again and to kind of look back on um, my memories of seeing it live. I've got in my blog post, which, what is it called? I forget. Oh, it's called Which Means I May Be Human, which is a line from one of the songs. I've got videos. One I think is official and legitimate, one is bootleg, of a couple of songs from the show, and I encourage you to go and watch those. And it is my contention that this would make a great Blumhouse movie. Um, it could be their first horror musical. Blumhouse is they did the It's and Get Out and Us. I think they did Us. I know they did Get Out. Um, at least I'm pretty sure. I'm actually not positive, but I think that Blumhouse is now they're the horror people, the horror movie company, and they have, I guess they're going to be in charge of reviving those classic Universal monsters: Dracula, Frankenstein, Invisible Man, Werewolf, Wolfman. Got the last version, the last Hollywood Wolfman with Benicio del Toro and Anthony Hopkins back there. And Anthony Hopkins gives a great monologue about being a werewolf in the movie, but that is not enough to make me keep it. So that's one of the ones that's being sold. But it is fun. It's a fun movie. It's just, yeah, I got to make room for movies that I'd rather have. Um, but a little bit of rewriting. It's a perfect musical to be a movie because the songs really do advance the plot. And so and it would slide smoothly from Act 1 into Act 2. That can be awkward because of the nature of Act 1 finales in musicals, and I think it deserves to be a movie. I'm happy to consult and or be in it. I'd love one day, I grew up thinking one day I'd play Bat Boy. At this point in my life, I'm hoping one day I play Dr. Parker. And yeah, so I don't, I think this first or second musical that I've read for the blog because usually I like to do those with, well, I mean, it's weird to read a musical because it's supposed to be, part of it's supposed to be sung. But I know all the musicals that I would read well enough that I can sing. I sang some of this out loud as I was reading it. I bought this on October 3rd when it came out, the day I got my flu shot, with a gift card or two. It is the second volume of the Book of Dust, as it says, and it is the let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, seventh book about Lyra Belacqua and the characters of his Dark Materials. His Dark Materials up there, and I haven't finished it because it's my slow read. I'm almost halfway through. It's the big red book that I'm currently reading, 10 pages at a time, but I'm enjoying it much more. I didn't love the first Book of Dust, which is over there on the shelf. I think largely because, as I'm finding with this one, it didn't have, I mean, Lyra was in it, but she was a baby. And this book is about her, for the most part. She takes up the majority of pages, her and her demon. And the moment that I knew I'm back where because I really loved reading the original three, and the moment that I knew that I was back in the world that I loved, that I really loved, that I would love this book, was the first time she lied, because that's was the key to her character before, how easily and wonderfully she lied, and that happened, and I smiled, and like I am smiling now, and so I'm not going to talk much more about it, but it is relevant here now for the same reason I brought this DVD over. I'm hoping we get non-Australia for this soon, because HBO is doing their version of this, their adaptation of his Dark Materials, of the Golden Compass specifically. And this movie, which I'll probably watch this weekend because the first episode airs on Monday, I'm okay with it. I think it's fine. It's not great, it's not perfect, but I could appreciate it. Mostly for the performances, mostly for the performance of Ian McKellen as the armored bear Yorick Byrnison. But it is not perfect, certainly, and perhaps it was best that the franchise die back then and not go on, so that I didn't have two other movies that were not perfect. Hoping HBO does, and I think BBC is involved as well, but then there are other people involved. um, that I don't trust as much. Um, so I have my apprehensions. I'm not going to prejudge the new series, but I have my apprehensions because this is tricky to adapt. It shouldn't be, but it is because it deals with religion, and the author is very explicit. It's not even being cagey about it. He's very explicit about, yes, it's anti-religion, and anti-religion is not exactly the most popular thing. It doesn't. It's not the maker of blockbusters. So might be able to hear the music going on. I said I wouldn't acknowledge it, but I did. Um, so this is a fun version. Hopefully, HBO version will be better. I do hope it's better, even though I have my doubts because I care so much about it. What's next on the? Oh well, um, November is has its own themes. Like January is now my birthday month, and so I read things I that are that I know that I'm going to love, that represent my favorite things, um, and October is horror stuff, and December is holiday stuff. November's themes kind of evolved over time. Um, the first one I think was mystery. Well, mysteries and books with Jewish themes around the same time because I started reading the Harry Kemmelman, Rabbi David Small mystery books in November, shortly after my grandfather died. I got the books. He had all the books, and it was a way of kind of feeling close to him shortly after he died. And now I read him every November because I would normally, back when he was alive, would have gone to Philadelphia, met that side of the family there, and so I kind of do that by reading the books. So this one is Thursday the Rabbi Walked Out. They're all something like the first one that I read, and the first one in the series is Friday the Rabbi Slept In. The titles are like that, except now this is the last weekday that I have to read. And then there are some like one day the rabbi will leave, conversations with the rabbi. I don't know what those titles are, but um, I will continue to read them in order until I run out. But this is the last weekday, and it's also the skinniest one of them in a long time. And so my other Jewish-themed book is Hasidic Tales of the Holocaust. Um, Another theme, well, continuing with mysteries, my other mysteries, my first Nancy Drew mystery, um, the the Ghost of Blackwood Hall. It's an old book, so it's hard to read the title there. It'll be my first Nancy Drew. I saw, I think, a Nancy Drew movie with Emma Roberts a couple of years ago on streaming, but this will be my first one that I'm reading. And there's a new Nancy Drew movie that I think Ellen DeGeneres produced that just became available on streaming. So I'll watch that before or after I read the book. They're not the same story, so I don't think it'll matter. And I'm not going like the Goosebumps. I'm not going to go crazy recollecting Clue. In fact, I probably won't buy any other Clue books except for this one. But The Haunted Gargoyle, I think, was the first Clue book that I wrote, which is Clue is the book series that really got me reading and following a series of books before Animorphs. So that probably primed me for Animorphs. I'm currently reading Death in a Tenured Position, which is from a mystery novel class that I took in college. I've held on to it this long because it was difficult to find a used copy until I went to the actual campus bookstore, and so for that reason I kind of got it into my mind that this was a rare book that I should hold on to, and I don't think that anymore. I think I could just get rid of it. It's not too expensive on Amazon. But I want to give it one more. It's lasted this long, so I want to give it one more read. Um, and I have the Tolkien Reader here, stories and poems from the author of Lord of the Rings. It came with my uncle's copies of the Lord of the Rings trilogy and The Hobbit, and so I'm going to give it a read. I read the other Lord of the Rings books in the month of October, so uh, Tolkien I'll read in the month of October. And then my last theme of November, probably why I will also be watching Pocahontas, is I know that Thanksgiving is kind of a misrepresentation of the welcome that Native Americans gave white settlers when they arrived. Um, So I don't read Thanksgiving-themed stuff, but I do like to read Native American stories. Even though this one, Zia by Scott Odell, written by a white person, but about it's actually the sequel to Island of the Blue Dolphins, which is based on a real person. And um, Island of the Blue Dolphins ends with her being rescued from the island, uh, which she was. And then I know what happened to her afterwards, but I don't remember. I think my mom did read this book to us when we were very young, my brothers and I. But I don't remember how her story is continued fictionally. So I'm looking forward to that. So that's my reading for November. Each of those will get a blog post, as will my Mr., Ms., Mrs. thing. Um, okay. Halloween costume. Oh, jack-o'-lantern. Um, November themes, books, Halloween. Okay, so my jack-o'-lantern you can kind of see back there. Depending on where I am, I guess different amounts of light reach it. But this looks good. You can see I carved the shape of a cat into the pumpkin. I did that last night when we got back from uh, doing some Halloween exploring in local neighborhoods. Some streets really go all out. So I wanted to point that out, and you can look on Instagram or Facebook for my young Dumbledore costume. And there's also better images of that. Um, Halloween is why there are always big cobwebs up behind me. Those are permanent Halloween decorations. And I can kind of see Wicked, Jekyll and Hyde, Beetlejuice, and Little Shop of Horrors playbills lined up under the mirror back there. And there are others. Those are my contributions to the Halloween decorations for my roommate's party, which is apparently, I think it's usually the weekend, the Sunday after Halloween. So people don't have to give up on Halloween. So I think that's also because the weekend of Halloween or the weekend before Halloween, everybody else is having their parties. So it's easier to get people to your party. So um, that's what this weekend will be about doing. So a couple more things, and this looks like it's going to be even longer than last week's, but it's all worth talking about. My play, Museum of the Offensive, was read, and I wrote about the reading, which is linked to below. Such a weird experience. The first time I've ever, well, it's not the first time I've had my dialogue read, it's the first time I've had my good dialogue read in a complete play. And the weirdest thing about it was just that it happened, because when I'm writing something, I don't want to say when you write something because I don't know who you are and I don't know what your experience is. But when I write something, I have the voices in my head and exactly the way that I want them to sound. And then when I read it out loud to myself, I read it exactly the way that I want it to sound. And if something sounds off, then I change it. But it's usually only a little bit of tweak. But here were 5 people who were not me reading my thing out loud, and so they were both interpreting my meaning differently or as made sense to them, and then speaking it in a way that made sense to them. And it really rattled me, because it turns out that and I kind of knew this, but I needed that element. It turns out it's not as good as I thought it was, and it's good, but it showed me things that I couldn't see from just cycling it through my own filter, which produced the same thing over and over again. So I came away from that 2 weeks ago, about 2 weeks ago, and I discussed it with my roommate on the walk, the hour-long walk up to our apartment after the meeting. It had been, there had been a talk back where the audience had said their interpretations, and then I digested all of that with my roommate on the way up, and I got very defined ideas about what I need to change, how I need to change it, things that I had this way or that been told in the past, but I couldn't see it without having heard it. So I had all that, and then this past weekend, someone challenged me. There's a short play festival coming up, and somebody challenged me, cut it down, create the 25-page version of your 70-page play. And so I think I'm going to do that. I'm definitely going to do that. The 70-page version will continue to exist, and I will probably eventually do everything that I was going to do, but right now I'm going to see if I can do everything that I wanted to do by making it a 25-page play. So that's the next step with that. But that's why it's good to hear. I mean, of course, it's good to hear, but that turns like I got into the idea of playwriting because why not? And um, so I had no idea what the process is supposed to be. I got some very good advice from the right people, and and this was one of the things that I kept hearing. Have you heard it? Have you heard it read? And now I have, and now I'm so that's it's an important step, and obviously it's what all playwrights want, but don't want the full production right away. Want the the small reading, and so that link will be underneath. It's called "Kill Your Darlings," which is a fraught cliche in the writing world, but appropriate because I came away from that reading thinking a lot of this stuff needs to go and either be replaced or just not replaced. And then finally, the this is a guitar. It is my dad's guitar, and I've been taking some online lessons, which is to say, watching videos. One particular guy, Marty Music, and I think I liked a video of his. If I haven't, I will, so that my YouTube channel links to him. But he's who I've been getting lessons from, and just, you know, people always say guitar's easy to learn. Anyone can learn guitar. For years, that made me feel bad because I had trouble. But now I'm starting to get it. Still not very good, but I am going to play something because I decided to rip off Mark Maron in addition to the Screen Junkies by my format. Um, so for that, I will click away here. I'm not going to name what I'm playing because if you can't get it, which then that's if you can get what I'm playing from what I play, then um, that says something good about it. But if you can't, then I feel like it's better if it's a mystery than if you know what I was trying and then I fail. So here goes something. So that's just the first verse and the chorus. Anyway, I got to the end of the list, and I'm at the 58-minute mark, which means it's about as long as it was last week. And I'm going to try to figure out how to make it shorter. I didn't talk about every single book, um, but that still wasn't enough. Anyway, it is fine though if it's this long, because there was, I think it was. I mean, there's the guitar, there's the playwriting thing, there's all the DVDs and all the books and all the ideas, and my shirt. So, but now I have to get rid of a lot of this stuff before my roommate gets home so that we can prepare for this room to look completely different for the party this weekend. I'd invite you, but it's not my party, and frankly, I really don't know who's watching this, if anybody. But if you are, like and subscribe, I guess, and as always, ram the blade ship.